My name is Samantha Pree-Stinson, and I am your Green and Labor endorsed candidate for Ward 3, working to bridge both sides of our river so that we have an economy that feeds both sides. We have downtown and the economic development there, and I think that we need to be thinking about the future of downtown. It's no longer retail. That's not the market that exists. We need to be looking at building a green economy with green-collar jobs that are going to provide 40-year consecutive sustainable jobs to continue to build and thrive that community, as well as looking at opportunities to bring in smart startups in the realm of IT that will also add to the vibrant economy of downtown and changing what that landscape looks like. But in addition to that, it's about balance and remembering that on the other side of the river, we have our student population and some elderly and homeowner folks in Marcy Homes, as well as the Beltrami and the Sheridan and the Botno neighborhoods, where you have a large amount of artists and families, and understanding that there's a lot of small business that adds to our local economy as well, and that is also part of the economic driver of Ward 3 and of our city. So this is a campaign about balance. It's about representing all voices, even those that don't agree with my ideologies, because at the end of the day, it's about putting people first and having a budget that matches our priority of housing, as well as our environmental issues that we're experiencing and our safety policing issues in our city.
All right, so the first question I have for you is, what do you feel is the biggest challenge that Minneapolis faces in 2018?
I think the biggest challenge is how we do our work at City Hall and the tone that we set for our city in general, and making sure that we are respecting all voices and remembering that it is a nonpartisan seat, and that means that you should be able to work with everyone even when they don't agree with you, and really setting the tone for how we do our work, having strong accountability measures in City Hall and a strong fiscally responsible budget so that we're not raising people's property taxes to pay for our budgetary shortfalls. So that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we face is really level setting at City Hall so that we're at an operational place where we can best provide service to our residents. And then looking at all solutions on the table for how we're gonna solve our housing crisis, because it's not just gonna be a one-size-fits-all approach. If it was, we would have solved it by now. So this is a multi-faceted approach. All things should be on the table. It should be fact and data-based, root cause analysis before we proceed forward and start creating more problems for us to have to solve in the long run.
If you were asked to develop a shadow budget that would cut 80% of all city spending, what mission-critical services would you demand be maintained?
I'm glad that you asked that, because I actually co-wrote a piece of the mayor's budget to cut places where we have this vanity spending. So a lot of people are still upset about the stadium. The way I feel about it is it's done now. So now it's, what are we gonna do about it? So we're gonna be spending approximately $23 million a year starting in the year 2020 for the next almost 40 years to pay that off. So we need to make sure that we have a $23 million match so that people are getting a service for what they gave in return, basically. So we need to, if we're talking about cutting things out, basically those three priorities of the environment, where we have GAF and we have lead issues and we have still the burning of the garbage, we need to resolve those issues, and we need to fund community health programs to make sure that we're following up on residents to resolve their respiratory issues, the increased cancer rates along Lowry, and just general poor lead or high level lead rates within children. So that needs to be a priority there. Also for housing, we need to put more money into that and develop more public-private partnerships in order to pay for it. So as far as cutting the spending, we don't need the streetcar. The money that the county is providing to us, in addition to the over $15 million that's there in that capture fund, that needs to be moved out. We also need to look at the money that we're gonna have back in our pocket in 2020 when we're done paying off Target Center and we're done paying off the Convention Center. All of that money also needs to be moved over. We can't hold on to it in this downtown asset fund for when we decide to do something else downtown whenever we want to. The money is there. That's irresponsible budgeting. We don't have that type of a budget where we can just have this vanity savings account. So we need to stop all those non-mission critical projects, move all that money into those three priorities, level set, make gains, have great milestones and mechanisms to be able to track our work, and then we can start talking about doing these extra things that are fun, but they don't provide to the overall aesthetic of the need of the people and where we're at currently.
Name at least one way that you will work to ensure that marginalized individual voices and concerns are heard.
So one thing, it starts with, again, how we work. So I want to have strong accountability measures that I place on myself, that I work with the community to make sure that when they feel that I'm not doing a good job or they have questions, they have a pathway to be able to do that. One is by having a visual management board that lays out exactly what our priorities are for the ward, the milestones of how we're going to get there, and the funding that's available to put towards it, with red, yellow, green of where I'm at. And that'll be visible on the city's page, so that everyone can see that, as well as through social media outlets. The other thing is making sure that we have meetings with the public during times when they can attend, and bringing the meetings to them and not expecting them to come downtown. So I want to have meetings that are after business hours, that are on the bus line, that are handicap accessible, and that always have translators available. So that way you can do that type of outreach. And then in addition to that, all of those priorities that will be on the visual management board, every single one of them will have a diversity or an equity metric to make sure that that voice is always heard, and those underlying issues that are feeding into this overall economic gap as far as communities on the margins are being met and addressed, so that we're not leaving people behind and furthering the gap like we've done over the last 10 to 15 years. So I think it's about strong accountability measures, making sure, I said in a forum last night, we need to stop inviting people to the table. People can build their own darn table and they can set it for themselves, and we need to meet them at the table and ask for them to invite us to the table, instead of creating these seats at the table for people that are a check the box well after the decisions have already been made and it's clear that those voices are just to say that they did it, instead of having it on the front end of the process and through every major milestone throughout the process.
Why are public access and independent media important in the 21st century?
Fake news. The problem that we have right now is that this is something I had to reflect upon deeply myself. As a veteran, for one, standing up for people for their constitutional rights is important. It's really easy to lose sight of that, though, when people are saying and doing things that don't agree with your personal ideology. The problem is that when you start silencing some voices, when does it end to what people decide what's acceptable or not? Because it's really easy to label a Black Lives Matter or some of these other groups that are marginalized groups talking about specific issues. It's very easy to then try to censor them as well. So we need to make sure that we always provide access for people to be able to have their free speech, regardless of whether we agree to it or not, because that's foundational to our country. I fought for it as a veteran, whether people want to take a knee or whether they want to have a TV show and it's controversial. Public access is the place where those things can happen. So it's very important that we keep those things in place so that people can hear from their neighbors firsthand what is going on and get other perspectives that you're not going to hear from mainstream media, where they have particular agendas that they're trying to push.
Last question. How can voters get more engaged at the local level of government?
So I think when people think of government, they think of big government, but even something as small as getting involved with your local neighborhood association. Those neighborhood associations get funding from the city so that they can do particular activities. So that's an outlet where you can get involved. Even if you have children in schools, getting involved in the schools, that's also a form of government. In addition to that, there are many different committees and councils at City Hall that you can apply to be on. It's a really good way to understand what is the process and how we govern our city and how those ordinances come to be, and just to kind of get a bird's eye view to what is going on, and you can kind of decide how involved or not involved you want to get. But ultimately, we are complicit when we don't use our voice, when we don't get involved in our community, when we don't directly contribute, and when we don't know what's going on. City elections specifically are the last stronghold and also the first line of defense for real change. And so it's vitally important that we stop being complicit to complaining about who's in City Hall, but yet we don't vote and we don't show up to make sure our voices are heard. We have to use our vote so that we stop repeating history. If we don't like the outcomes, we have to stop putting the people in office that continue to give us the poor outcomes and get new, fresh voices in that add that diversity of thought and perspective, so that we have something that's more robust and more reflective and representative of the democracy and the people that we're serving.
Awesome. Any last words about your campaign or what you want your constituents to know?
I'm just excited to have support from pretty much every political party, from every socioeconomic status. People really like the pragmatic approach to leadership and understanding that it is complicated, but you have to be willing to have tough conversations and put yourself in situations where you're able to really be the speaking voice for the people that you're serving and making sure that you're representing their interests and staying connected. And as a veteran and a mother of 3 sons here in Minneapolis, my husband and I have been here for 20 years. We coach soccer, we're involved with the schools, we're involved in local government, we're involved in local radio and TV stations. And the reason that we do that is because it's important to be connected to the community if you're going to be able to represent them wholeheartedly. So I'm excited for the possibilities of what we can do together as a ward and really start bridging the gaps and start healing and coming together as a community. Instead of putting up divides and talking about everything that we're against, I think we need to do more about what we're for. And so I'm excited to be at the possibility to represent you. Make sure you vote regardless of whether I'm your first, second, or third choice. You have a voice and you have a choice. Please make sure that you use it on November 7th.